April 15th, 1943. Somewhere above Fort Hertz, northern Burma. The wind screams against the fuselage of a C-47 Skytrain as Lieutenant Jack Ferguson fights the controls. The cockpit is shaking, the altimeter needle dancing wildly between 16,000 and 20,000 feet. Ice creeps across the windshield like spider webs, and oxygen hisses through his mask with each ragged breath. Below him, nothing. Only clouds and jagged shadows of mountains that rise higher than any aircraft of the day was designed to climb. Somewhere beneath those clouds lies the infamous stretch of terrain the pilots called the Hump, the eastern edge of the Himalayas, where wind currents could flip a fully loaded transport plane like a toy. Ferguson's co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Ed Tex Harmon, wipes frost from his goggles. "We're 10 minutes behind the formation," he shouts. "Fuel's low." Ferguson nods, eyes fixed on the engine gauges. "If we drop lower, we're dead. If we stay up here, we freeze." This is not Europe. There are no fighters, no flak bursts, no cheering crowds below. This is the most dangerous supply route in the world, a 1,000-mile chain of airfields stretching from India to China, carved into jungles and mountains after Japan cut the Burma Road in 1942. When Japan seized Burma, China was isolated. Its vast armies, fighting since 1937, were starving for fuel, weapons, and hope. The only way to keep China in the war was to fly over the roof of the world. And so, from dusty runways in Assam, India, American transport squadrons of the U.S. Army Air Transport Command began the unthinkable, a non-stop aerial bridge across the Himalayas. Each flight meant threading through towering storms, frost-bitten altitudes, and unpredictable jet streams that could tear wings apart. Crews nicknamed it the Aluminum Trail because wrecked planes dotted the route like metallic gravestones. Ferguson checks his compass. The magnetic needle spins uselessly. "Navigation's gone," he mutters. Tex looks at the radio. Silence, only static. Somewhere ahead lies Kunming, China. Somewhere below, the jungle waits. He glances out the window. The stars fade as lightning flashes over the next ridge. "Hold on," he growls. "We're going over the hump." 2 years earlier, December 1941. When Japan's armies swept through Southeast Asia, they didn't just conquer land. They cut arteries. The Burma Road, China's last overland lifeline to the outside world, was severed. Without it, Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces faced collapse. Ammunition stocks dwindled, aircraft sat grounded without fuel, and American Lend-Lease supplies piled up uselessly in India. General Joseph Vinegar Joe Stilwell, never one to mince words, slammed his fist on the planning table. "If we can't go around the Japanese," he barked, "then we'll go over them." At first, the idea sounded like madness. Flying over the Himalayas? The mountains rose higher than 25,000 feet. The weather was murderous, and no reliable maps existed. But desperate times breed audacity. And in early 1942, the newly formed U.S. Army Air Transport Command, ATC, began planning an airlift from Assam, India, to Kunming, China. Their aircraft were lumbering workhorses. C-47 Skytrains, C-46 Commandos, and later the massive C-54 Skymasters. The men who flew them were not fighter aces, but they would face a deadlier enemy, nature itself. The first airfield at Dinjan, Assam, was little more than a strip of compacted mud surrounded by jungle. Mechanics worked barefoot in the heat, patching engines swarmed by mosquitoes. The air reeked of fuel and sweat. Beside the runway, Chinese laborers unloaded crates stamped with property of U.S. Army Air Forces. spare parts, ammunition, medical supplies, and jerry cans of 100-octane fuel for the Flying Tigers. By April 1942, the first test flights began. Each pilot received a simple briefing. Fly east until you see mountains. Then climb. Keep climbing. Captain William Wild Bill Coulter, one of the first to attempt the run, described it later in his logbook. We climbed until the altimeter hit 22,000. Couldn't breathe, couldn't see, ice on the wings, engines coughing. Burma below looked like a green sea with teeth. In those early months, survival was uncertain. Planes vanished weekly. Some dove into valleys hidden by fog. Others slammed into unseen peaks. Recovery crews rarely found the wrecks, only oil slicks glinting on snowfields. Yet every day, more planes took off. What began as a handful of missions soon became a lifeline for a nation. In dimly lit control rooms at Chabua and Tezpur, young airmen traced flight paths on maps held together with tape, radioing weather warnings through static. They didn't know it yet, but this fragile experiment, this chain of roaring engines over frozen peaks, would become the longest, most dangerous airlift in history.
We're losing altitude! Oh!
June 1943, the Hump route, eastern Himalayas. The pilots call it Hell's Wind Tunnel, and today, the name feels earned. Lieutenant Ferguson's C-47, Old Bessie, groans under her load. 5 tons of aviation fuel strapped into steel drums. The engines are at full throttle, vibrating so hard the yoke hums in his palms. The airspeed indicator flickers between 160 and 170 knots. Below him, the mountains rise in jagged waves. Blue, gray, then white. Without warning, a downdraft slams the aircraft. The nose drops. The altimeter spins down past 18,000 feet. Ferguson pushes the throttles forward, teeth clenched. The cargo shifts with a metallic roar. "Come on, girl. Hold together." Tex grabs the control column and yells, "She's not climbing." "Dump the load," Ferguson shouts back. But the drums stay locked, frozen straps in the icy hold. The aircraft shudders again, wings creaking under stress. Somewhere outside, lightning flashes violet across the canopy. This is the Hump. 500 miles of turbulent sky between Assam and Kunming, where Himalayan peaks punch through clouds like spears. The storms build without warning. Winds can shear off wingtips or throw a fully loaded C-46 into a tailspin. Many pilots never returned. Their names listed quietly on ATC rosters, marked missing over India. Every mission follows the same brutal rhythm. Take off at dawn from Assam, climb for an hour, freeze at altitude, dodge the monsoon storms, then descend through cloud to find Kunming's dirt runway, if they can see it at all. Navigation is dead reckoning and luck. Radio signals bounce off the mountains. Magnetic compasses spin uselessly. Pilots follow landmarks. A curved ridge that looks like a sleeping elephant, a river delta shaped like a claw. Miss one, and you vanish into mist. Yet, amid the chaos, skill and courage shine. Crews learn to read the sky. A certain cloud color means ice. A sudden calm before turbulence. Mechanics at Tezpur modify carburetors for thin air. Meteorologists chart storm cells by hand. Everyone fights not the enemy, but the elements. At Kunming, ground crews cheer when the first silhouettes appear through cloud gaps. C-47s limping in on fumes. They land hard, brakes screeching, engines coughing black smoke. Chinese workers swarm the planes, unloading crates of ammunition, gasoline, and food. The supplies are precious beyond measure. Every drum of fuel means another sortie by the Flying Tigers, the 14th Air Force, striking Japanese supply lines along the Yangtze. Every case of ammunition keeps Chinese divisions armed for another week. but the cost is staggering. By the end of 1943, more than 500 aircraft have been lost over the Hump, and nearly 1,000 men. Wreckage litters the mountains, scattered like metal bones among the snowfields of Tibet. In his logbook that night, Ferguson writes, "Made Kunming, barely, engines shot. Tex says we should have died 5 times today. Maybe we did, and this is heaven." The next morning, he climbs back into the cockpit and flies west again toward another storm. Spring 1944, Assam, India. The airfield at Chabua no longer feels experimental. What began as a handful of battered C-47s has transformed into a thunderous production line of flight. Day and night, engines roar over the tea fields of Assam. Twin rows of olive-drab aircraft lifting off one after another, climbing toward the clouds. By now, the mission has become industrial. General William H. Tunner, a relentless organizer known for his precision and temper, takes command of the India-China Division of the Air Transport Command. His orders: increase tonnage, cut losses, and turn chaos into choreography. Tunner walks the flight line at dawn, clipboard in hand, watching mechanics in sweat-stained coveralls hammer out dents and swap engines under floodlights. "No delays," he mutters. "Every hour counts." He introduces radar beacons, weather stations, and scheduled flight corridors. Air crews are briefed like clockwork. Pilots fly in strict intervals, a constant aerial chain stretching from Chabua to Kunming. Tunner's men start calling it the Iron River. Each day, hundreds of planes now cross the Hump. C-46 Commandos, larger than the old C-47s, carry double the load. Fuel, ammunition, aircraft engines, even mules for Chinese mountain troops. From above, the sky glitters with silver shapes gliding east through the haze. Still, the danger remains. On July 10, 1944, a storm cell over Fort Hertz swallows an entire formation. Radio contact vanishes. Only one plane emerges, its co-pilot frozen dead in his seat from lack of oxygen. The rest are never found. Tunner responds the only way he knows how, by tightening discipline even further. Crews grumble, but the results speak for themselves. By late 1944, monthly deliveries reach 30,000 tons, more than the entire Burma Road ever carried before the war. At Kunming, the unloading ramps hum with activity. Crates marked U.S. Army Air Forces are stacked beside others marked in Chinese. Medicine, spare tires, lubricants, and raw materials for the expanding Chinese Air Force. Every drop of aviation fuel here has crossed mountains higher than the Rockies, carried by men who fly blind through snow and lightning. One of those men, now Captain Jack Ferguson, steps down from his C-46 Lucky 7 after his 200th run. His flight jacket is cracked from cold, his face burned by altitude. He watches Chinese mechanics refuel his plane for the return trip and mutters to Tex, now a flight commander, "You ever think about how many of us are up there right now?" Tex grins, weary. "Yeah, looks like we finally built a highway in the sky." By early 1945, that highway stretches farther than anyone dreamed. 650 aircraft fly daily missions over the Hump. Supplies pour into China to feed the advancing 14th Air Force, which now strikes deep into Japanese-held territory. The Iron River has become unstoppable, a living, breathing artery of war that no bomb or blockade can sever. But even as victory nears, the cost continues to climb. Every week, planes still vanish into the clouds. Somewhere above Tibet, sunlight glints off a frozen wing half buried in snow, a silent reminder of the men who never came home. August 1945. Kunming, China. The war is almost over. The radio hums with rumors of a new weapon dropped on Japan, a bomb as bright as 1,000 suns. But for the men of the Hump, the mission continues. The air still smells of fuel and sweat. Propellers still cut through the dawn. The war might be ending for others. Not here. Not yet. Captain Ferguson sits on the wing of his C-46, boots hanging above the tarmac, staring at a tattered map covered in grease stains. The routes, the altitudes, the coordinates, all burned into muscle memory now. He's flown this path more times than he can count. Tex joins him, holding 2 tin mugs of bitter coffee. They say Japan might surrender any day, Tex says. Guess we'll finally get some rest, Ferguson replies, though he doesn't sound convinced. The Hump route had changed them all. Men who arrived as cargo pilots left as veterans of a battle fought not with bullets, but with storms and gravity. They carried no medals. No parades waited for them back home. Their enemy was invisible. Ice, altitude, exhaustion. By war's end, the numbers defy belief. More than 650,000 individual flights, over 740,000 tons of cargo delivered. Nearly 1,000 aircraft lost and 1,300 men dead, more than many combat divisions. But their sacrifice kept China in the fight. It kept the Flying Tigers and the Chinese Nationalist Army supplied long enough for Japan's empire to collapse from within. When the atomic bomb falls on Hiroshima on August 6th, word spreads across the airfields of Assam and Kunming in stunned silence. Crews gather around radios, faces pale in the dim light. For 3 years, they had carried the war on their wings. And now, suddenly, it's over. On August 15th, Japan surrenders. The engines fall silent. For the first time, the skies above the Himalayas are calm. Ferguson stands by the runway, watching the clouds drift over the distant peaks. He thinks of the aluminum trail, the wrecked planes scattered across those mountains, their crews entombed in ice. They'll never know it's done, he murmurs. Tex places a hand on his shoulder. They knew what they were fighting for, Tex says quietly. Same as us. Weeks later, the last Hump flight departs Kunming, its cargo hold empty. The pilots fly low over the mountains, dipping their wings in salute. Below them, the rivers glint like silver ribbons. The sun breaks through the clouds, painting the sky gold. The war that began with desperate hope has ended with an achievement beyond imagination. The world's first sustained strategic airlift, born from necessity, carried by courage. Long before Berlin and Korea, before modern air bridges and humanitarian drops, there was the Hump. And in the howling winds above the Himalayas, where aluminum still glitters in the snow, the echo of their engines remains, a monument to the men who carried the sky.